Hello, everyone. As Mike said, my name is Dan Primack, business editor at Axios. Just quickly, we announced this yesterday, but if anyone is in New York City, and hopefully you will be, on November 18th, we just announced will be our next BFD, our big deal maker summit. But as Mike said, we want to talk AI, we want to talk healthcare, and we have Christophe Weber, the CEO of Takeda Pharmaceuticals here. Christophe, you have been CEO of this company for nearly 10 years. I think April is your CEO anniversary. Do you remember the first time somebody came to you and said, we want to use AI to do something inside Takeda, and what that was?
Yeah, that's, I think about 5 years ago, when the machine learning was becoming much more concrete. That's when we really decided to pivot and to become a tech biopharmaceutical company. Yeah.
When you say that, what does it mean? Because I hear this term, and not just from you guys, but also from you, we want to be a digital biopharma company. What does that actually mean compared to just a biopharma company?
Well, it means that we are really being able to harness big data, different technology, combined with AI, and change the way we operate across our entire value chain, whether it is in research, in development, in manufacturing. So for us, it's a big change, actually. Brian, before me, was explaining how Bank of America started earlier. We didn't. We are a pure brick and mortar legacy type company, and becoming a tech like that is actually a big shift.
Yeah, so I understand. So for example, you guys are using AI, for example, in clinical trial patient recruitment, for example. How much of what you're doing is really with AI is in the lab itself in terms of either in terms of identification or development?
Yeah, in research, for example, we are using now large language model and AI and big data to design molecules, to design molecule, to improve molecule design, and to do it faster. So in our industry, there is a lot of iteration, whether it is to design a molecule or to design a clinical trial. Data and AI allow us to do this iteration much faster. So it's all about speed as well.
So does that mean, and when we think, and we've talked at this event for the last couple of days about LLMs, large language models, as you just said, and we think about Anthropic, we think about OpenAI, kind of these very generalist LLMs. Is there essentially a Takeda, I don't know what you call it, but a Takeda-specific LLM that you guys use based on your data? That's been trained on Takeda data as opposed to the world.
Yeah, we don't design the foundational algorithm. We use different partners' algorithm, but we have the internal capability now to improve it and to customize it as well. Actually, we use a lot of machine learning, LLM as well for some tasks, but we use a lot of machine learning capability because it's the input and the output is very robust. We can demonstrate that it's very stable, and we are a highly regulated industry, so we cannot live with an uncertainty about the output.
Do it's when you talk about becoming a digital biopharma company in your 10 years, and it's about 5 years ago that people started internally talking about it. I interviewed the LinkedIn CEO the other day, and they'd just come out with a report saying, I think that 70% of the skills that I say this collectively, that we currently have in our jobs will be not used or kind of irrelevant by 2030. When you look within your company, do you sense that there's any fear for kind of career pharma people saying, the way I came up, the things I know are becoming less and less important?
There is a bit of fear, but what we realize is that technology, AI, will mainly enhance what people do. And there are not so many, we don't see so many jobs completely replaced by AI or by agent AI. There are a few, but it's really, what we have seen, we did a full review of all the jobs in the company, with less than 10% will be massively impacted by AI. The majority will have their task enhanced by a digital companion or agent AI.
How comfortable do you feel with it? You are a pharma. You've been in pharma your whole career. You were obviously Glaxo before you came to Takeda. When you hear these, how was kind of your learning curve? I guess is maybe the way to say it.
Well, it has been a learning curve. the chance I have in my job is that I can connect with whoever I need to connect to. So I learn a lot talking with tech companies, people like the early developer of this technology, and understanding the potential for us and for our company. And so that's why we started. First, our data architecture was absolutely not prepared for this new world, so we had to decide to move to the cloud about 7 years ago. And
so
that's
you had some servers and a bunch of Excel spreadsheets? Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
Okay.
Very, very decentralized, internal server. The data was not architectured well, so we had to do that. That took us 3 years. And now more than 95% of our data is on the cloud, and it's architectured, so we can really work with it.
And I think I read that you made a change that and I don't know what the official title is. Maybe I don't think it's CTO, but head of IT basically now reports directly to you as opposed to used to report to the CFO.
That's right. So we have our Chief Data and Technology Officer on the executive team. We have a quite specific organization where we have a central capability for data architecture, for example, for computer science capability. But we have also embedded Chief Data and Technology Officer in the different divisions of the company, in R&D, in manufacturing, in our commercial operation. So it's an organization like that.
Do you feel we're going to get to the point, when I think of pharma development, obviously it's extraordinarily expensive to design and to develop a drug, whether it succeeds or not. Even if it fails, it's very, very expensive. One of the biggest expenses there is the phase 2 clinical trials. Do you think with AI, we are going to get to a point where your phase 2 clinical trials are going to be run on a computer in your offices rather than in hospitals around the world?
Well, you still need to test the molecule on people, right?
You do, but I guess, I guess that's I guess partially my question. I obviously that you could do that at phase 3. Do you think we will be able to basically digitize a lot of what we currently do in terms of human testing?
Yes, we could. Whether we will trust fully that model, questionable. We are not there yet.
We're not there yet. Do you
what
think
we can do is to test it.
Yeah.
Is to test it early and to really, we will have human models. And then we will be able to modelize the impact of the molecules. I think it will take a while before we trust that to approve a molecule that is then used by millions of patients.
See, I agree with that. And then on the other hand, I also was in San Francisco a month or two ago, and I ordered myself a Waymo in a car that didn't have a driver. And I'm sure 10 years ago, the idea of hopping into a car without a driver would have just been insane, and I would have never considered it. Would it be that in part, at least not in the short term, but maybe in the medium term, that what the AI gets, when you think about testing a drug, right? There's human cells react to lots of different things, and there's thousands, untold different variations on what we all have in our bodies. That the AI will enhance that. In other words, that for kind of call it the edge cases, that's what AI will get used for to maybe test some of those out, those interactions out.
Yeah, it's possible, but the difference between a car and a human body is that we understand pretty well how a car works. We built it. The human bodies are still a vast area that we don't understand. And that's the serendipity risk of molecules. You never know because we don't understand how the human body works. Still, we know a lot, but not the full. And that's a challenge because how do you model that something that you don't understand?
That's right.
And that's still the gap which is existing, right?
So Takeda is obviously a global company. You're French. The company is based in Japan. You have a huge operation in my hometown of Boston. When you think about AI, every government is talking about regulating AI in different sorts of ways, and every government's trying to get their heads around it. As a global company, does that make your life a little complicated, having major operations, say, in Japan and the US, when they might regulate these technologies which are becoming core to you differently?
It is when there are regulations. Let's take data privacy, for example, or patient data privacy. We are conducting clinical trials across the world. Of course, if you are dealing with very different regulation, it's more complicated, and you need to keep track of that. Even in the US, you have now state regulation, right?
Yeah.
So and we operate in all the states in the US. So that's of course. That creates complexity that you need to manage.
If you could get all, maybe they're here in Davos. If you could get kind of all of your big regulators together in a room and tell them the one thing you would like them all to do in concert, other than approve your drugs, what would be the thing?
So I think one of the big question mark in healthcare is patient data. Who owns patient data? Who has the right to access to patient data? What are the mechanisms here? And many different, everybody is thinking about that. Countries are going into different direction. Sometimes it's a pure private market dynamic. Sometimes it's highly regulated by the government. So that's one area that would be so helpful for the healthcare system to improve if we clarify that point.
There's this concept of predictive care, and you've talked a little bit about AI helping with that. Can you just talk about that a little bit, what that means?
Yeah, it means that, in fact, if you look at healthcare, we talked a lot about prevention, and we don't do enough. But then
and you know there's a perception that pharma companies talk about prevention, but don't really want it, because then if it's prevented, they don't have anyone to sell to.
Yeah, but you know, prevention is about sleep well, exercise well, eat and drink well. People will still. So we are not against that at all. Actually, the problem is that when you develop a disease, it is diagnosed very late. Whether it is a cancer, there is a rare disease, a mental health. Often it is diagnosed 10 years, 15 years before it started, after it started. And predictive healthcare is technology and data to make this prediction or diagnosis way earlier and to intervene earlier. And I think this is a near-term future. I think we really see that happening. Yeah.
When I think about regulations, obviously also politics, and Trump has been kind of one of the big topics here in Davos this week. When he came into office 8 years ago, he talked a lot about lowering drug prices in general. That was a big initiative of his. You were asked about that here not here, but over there at that event. You kind of brushed it off a little bit. Do you feel that is no longer as big a priority for Trump 2.0 as it was 1.0?
Well, I think access and affordability on how the healthcare system works in the US is a big issue. So I cannot imagine that a new administration is not focusing on that. The point is that the US healthcare system is very unique among developed countries. There is no comparison. And my plea is that the US has to find its improvement in solution within the US. So drug pricing, it's very clear that the price of drugs in the US is way higher than in Europe. But there are reasons for that linked to the US healthcare system, how it's designed. So you need to reshape it, you need to change it within the US. Comparing drug pricing, you are comparing elephant and rabbits. They are completely different healthcare system with a very different dynamic.
I mean, the person who is going to be charged with doing that is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Takeda doesn't have a huge vaccine business, but it is part of your business. You have one that just came recently for dengue fever. Do you have any concerns about RFK Jr. as being in charge of not just the US healthcare system, but the FDA, given his stance and views about things like vaccines?
Let's see what happens in terms of policy, in terms of regulation. What I have seen over the years is that what people say during a campaign and what people do when they are in charge. But this is more than a campaign.
This is 20 years of writing.
Sure. Well, my plea is that I believe vaccines have a huge value. So my plea is that it's very clear that vaccines are very helpful for public health, and has been actually a vaccine hesitancy movement for years. And we need to do a better job at re-explaining the value of vaccines.
This isn't something you're directly involved in, but I'm curious, because you are a pharma CEO, and when you talk about vaccines, the reason Davos was warmer about 4 years ago was because we were all here, I was not, but everybody else was here in the spring because of COVID. There are concerns now about this avian flu, which is beginning to spread. Do you have any thoughts about kind of how worried people should be or not about it?
Well, I mean, what is very clear is that there will be a next pandemic at one stage. Unfortunately, it's just the nature of the thing, and my plea is that the world should be better prepared when the next pandemic happens.
Do you think it's been 4 years since, right? 4 years since COVID. Do you believe that we have, when I say we, the world has done a better job preparing?
No,
Why?
Why? Because countries have not been able to agree yet how they will behave when the next pandemic starts somewhere. Yeah. There is no agreement. And everybody, after the previous pandemic, everybody agreed that, well, we should agree about how we will behave next time. We have not been able to strike an agreement here. And therefore, if there is a new pandemic starting in a country A somewhere, it will still be completely disorganized on how countries manage that individually. Whereas the world will benefit from coordination or an agreement before it happens.
Well,
and
that's
we are not
heartening.
there. Yeah.
That's very heartening. Let's leave on a more optimistic note.
That's
then we're disorganized. And we're
Yeah.
going to have another
Yeah.
COVID pandemic. And this is kind of a vaccine question, but not really. It's more a medicine question. I was just thinking when I was thinking about vaccines, and my mother was part of the original polio trials, 50, 60 years ago. And so as such, polio is not something, for example, my kid ever thinks about or I ever had to think about. Do you believe in 30 or 40 years, there's a disease which is very prevalent today, not a rare disease, but that's very prevalent today, that generation, maybe my grandkids, yours, won't even think about because it's not going to be something they've ever known anyone to have?
Well, actually, that's happening with vaccines. It's very good that the disease disappear. So people forget about it, how it was before the vaccines. And that's when the vaccine hesitancy grow, because they say, well, why should I vaccinate my kids if there is no disease? So I think there is a sort of reverse correlation between the disease disappearing and the vaccine hesitancy in time. So on the other hand, what polio has shown is that it's very difficult to eradicate a disease.
Yeah.
It's very difficult. The world is very big. There are billions of people, and so it's very hard. Yeah.
Well, we wish everybody luck, including the AI. And Christophe, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And next up is my colleague, Nicholas Johnson. Nick.